Hey guys, I'm Aditya Yadav, and you're listening to The Sound Report. In this podcast, I speak with some of the most talented professionals in the movie industry about the various production and post production aspects of sound for films. Being a sound designer myself, I've always been curious to know how other sound designers and mixers work. And this podcast is just an attempt to explore the art of sound design further. So, whether you're an industry pro or just starting out, I hope this podcast packs a little something for all of you. That being said, thank you so much for joining, and let's roll the intro. Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. My guest for today is someone who is associated with some of the most successful films in the Marathi film industry. His passion towards film sound took him to London, where he pursued an MA in audio production from the University of Westminster. Post his graduation, he decided to return to his homeland, where he set up his first studio in the same house he grew up as a kid. Setting up his studio away from the primary hub of film sound, he knew that his journey from there was not going to be an easy one. But through constant struggle, he managed to establish himself as one of the most talented sound designers in recent times. Moviegoers and other sound designers appreciated his work, myself included, and it earned him the first Marathi Filmfare Award for his work on director Abhijit Panse's Reggae. This was enough for him to understand what mattered more in this industry was not the geographical position of his studio, but the constant hustle towards being the best. Running successfully in theaters right now, his latest film Thackeray is probably one of the biggest films he has worked on. And I'm here in Mixbox Studios today talking to the man behind the sound of Thackeray himself. So please, help me welcome Mr. Rohit Pradhan. Welcome to the show, Rohit.
Hi Aditya, good to be here.
So before we start deconstructing the sound for Thackeray, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
First of all, no one from my family is into films or sound or music. So very early I took up learning keyboard and piano, and the only condition given by my father to me was you learn it seriously. So I took it up very seriously, and that introduced me to music made on electronic keyboards, and that was enough to spark up the whole passion in the child in me that I was intrigued by what those keyboards could do. So from a 1 octave keyboard, it went on to a 4 octave keyboard to a 5 octave keyboard, and it was a never-ending thing. One fine day, one of my friends in the band asked me to accompany him to a recording studio, and that day changed my entire life. I went there and I said I want to do this. So again, the curiosity was there, and I asked the engineer, how did he do this? How did he record it? And that time, the engineer had an ADAT. So it was the transition period between the digital tape and the DAWs. He said that you get yourself educated and, then you step into a studio. And I did follow his words, and I went on to SAE Chennai, did my diploma, came back. And after SAE Chennai, it was a roller coaster ride. I worked in music studios. I worked on large format recording consoles, big bands. Like I was recording 80-piece string orchestras, I was recording background score, and that was still the initial days of using the DAW just as a recorder and doing most of the things on the outboard. So that even introduced me to a lot of gear, using the gear correctly. And fast forward to that, as I went on to University of Westminster, where I did my MA, and that again changed a lot of things in my thought process. Before I went there, a lot of my peers were like, what will you learn? You've done most of it. What will you learn there? And even I had that same question, that same burning question, what will I learn there? But it completely changed my perspective towards my profession, towards how do I handle clients, how do I handle pressure, how do I do it when the client needs it, and plus the new technologies that I was introduced to. So, and after that course, I started my own studio when I came back, and yeah, that's it. The long journey cut short, but yeah, that's how I got into this, and it's a never-ending passion that has kept it alive.
So, like I mentioned in the intro, and where I said that your studio is located away from the
Yeah.
central hub of film sound, and that's a very ballsy move in itself. And
Exactly.
you know that it matters a lot, like the position
Yeah.
of where your studio is located. Unfortunately, that becomes a factor whether people want to work with you or not.
Absolutely.
How did you tackle that?
When I was searching for places where would I set up my studio, this was the place where I set up a small room, which was my work desk, and I thought that I would work out of this room and do freelance. And the word of mouth spread really quickly because Thane was at that time, it was not open to any post production or any audio post or dubbing. It just had 3 music studios, and everyone knew that there's this guy who's come back from UK and who's doing some stuff in his room and all. So I had clients coming in day out, and I would give credit to Kaushal Inamdar, who was doing a project with me, and he said that why don't you set up a studio here, and then the whole list of questions came in as to we are outside the main area, we are selling fish outside the fish market, and also we are selling fish to people who don't eat fish. so all those analogies came in, and Kaushal was really he encouraged me to start this thing up. And my course leader at Westminster had told me that always fill the gap in the market. Whatever you do, try and fill up the gap in the market. And I could see this huge gap in Thane that time, which had a small Marathi film industry around it. And they didn't have a place to go and do their dubbings. They didn't have the place and do the premixes or the sound design or the audio post. And I decided to fill up that gap. But the year that I started, 2007, things were not moving then. Things were very dormant. The industry was dormant, and to get it moving, we needed a spark. I needed a spark. I needed a Friday hit. I needed something that would tell people that okay, this is done here. And that opportunity came very late in 2011 with Balak Balak, Ravi Jadav's film, and that changed everything for me. That put me onto the map, that put me onto the radar, where artists said okay, let's go there and do the dubbing. And I think after the film fair, I think it has been an inspiring story for a lot of kids who want to set up studios in Thane, and I feel that they should do it. The only way to break geographical barriers is doing hard work and doing what you believe.
So yeah, Balak Balak put you up on the map, and that association with Ravi Jadhav went far ahead. Like you
Yeah.
ended up doing a lot more films with him.
Yes.
And needless to say, all of them were super hit. The Friday blockbusters which you wanted,
Yeah.
I think all of them turned out to be
Yeah.
those. One other film which I really want to talk about, which is kind of my personal favorite, is Abhijit Panse's Reggae.
Reggae was and is a very special film to me because the way reggae was written. When Abhijit sir narrated the story to me, I was blown away. I said this is going to be very challenging. Because reggae had a screenplay which demanded a very tight audio design. It demanded a very tight sound design or a sound edit, because there are 3 stories running parallel to each other. So when I was given the script, I sat with the script, I did a sound script, and I was not prepared for what I would get once the movie was shot and edited. And when I got that, I was blown away more. But reggae, I was involved right from the beginning. I did a lot of location recordings, and very few people know. In fact, I will have to go back to the credits myself. I have done the Foley for reggae. So I was the Foley artist also, and I wasn't credited on it. My 2 other team members were credited, and that was deliberately done by me. But I am the Foley artist on reggae. So for reggae, I did the dialogue dubbing, I did the sound edit, I did the Foley, and it was mixed by Justin Jose.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so that was reggae, and reggae was really different for me. It's very close to my heart.
So did Abhijit give you an idea about Thackeray back then?
Not at that time. In fact, he's done one other film, and he also told me that okay, we may end up working on that film, but I had no clue about Thackeray that time.
So how early on were you brought on board for Thackeray?
I was on board before the shoot. They did a teaser a year ago, a year back before the film released, and I was involved from the teaser itself because the teaser itself demanded the entire sound design, the crowds, and all. So I was involved pretty much earlier, and I was given the script to read, both the scripts to read, Hindi and Marathi as well. And that's where I got involved with Thackeray.
And how did it help your process as a sound designer? Because usually as sound designers, we get on board after the shoot is done, after the edit is done, after the edit is locked. Was there anything in particular that you got a chance to prepare for, given the fact that you were brought on board so early on in the process?
A lot of things, because I strongly believe and I strongly feel that sound designers should be brought on board at the scripting stage, because they can give their own perspectives, they can add on to some creativity or some scenes or the way scenes are shot. I received a script and I went through it, I read it completely, and I thought that yeah, that was the time I had decided about the crowds, because I got references from the script which told me that okay, there are going to be 5 lakh people in front of Balasaheb, there are going to be 5,000 people attending the sabha, this is the riot scene, this is, so I got a lot of inputs from the script itself. And what I had done is I had made markings on the script as to where I would need crowds. So what I had done was, this is very interesting, I had bought different colored post-its to stick on the script to tell me where crowd was needed. So for me, green color post-it was the crowd scene, the pages where we needed to record crowd. And you would be surprised that half of the script was stuck with those green post-it tapes, stating where crowd was needed. So that working helped me a lot in knowing what I was going into at the post stage once the film was given to me. So yeah, that's where the script helped me a lot. And I feel that yes, a lot of directors should provide sound designers or sound editors with scripts so that it gives them a fair idea of what they're going to get after the film is edited.
Was there anything that you got to record on set?
Yeah, I did record a few crowd tracks on set. There was not much because it was decided that this is going to be a complete ADR film. So there was very less sound discipline on set. So recording anything was a little difficult with the way they were shooting. It was very dynamic and it was changing many times. So not much, but yeah, I did record a few crowds on set, which did end up as a layer in the final sound design.
Given the fact the number of people who attended Balasaheb Thackeray's rallies just to hear the man speak, it's impossible to get that many people in the studio.
Absolutely.
Can you tell us a little bit about the entire crowd recording process? For example, which studios you recorded in, what microphones you used, what techniques you used?
Since I've started doing sound design, my go-to crowd director has been Uday Sabnis. So he and his team have done crowd dubbings for all my films, and he was my first and last choice for Thackeray. So when we got Uday in and I explained to him the magnanimity of the whole thing, he was like, we don't have so many artists right now. So my brief to him was, I need 100 artists for the slogans, for the riots. And then we had one-liners, then we had spot artists. So the Wala or the group was initially supposed to be 100. And the only place where I could do it in Mumbai was the YRF Music Stage 1, where Shantanu Hudlikar is the main engineer and Abhishek Khandelwal also is there. So I had spoken to Abhishek and I did ask him what is the capacity at the studio, and they said we could fit in 110. So I was stuck to 100. I needed 100 people, but many times with the production cost, we brought it down to 80 because it was practically possible to get in 80 people comfortably there. Once that was done, me and my team did an entire scripting of what slogans need to be recorded. So we figured out that this would take roughly around 2 shifts. Initially, what I did was I recorded those slogans as a cue track wherever they were. My instructions were recorded onto the picture to provide as a guide track, as a pilot track. So when we go to Yashraj, there is no confusion. We know that, okay, this is where the pilot is coming. This is where we need to do this. And a couple of days before the recording, I did have a meeting with Abhishek, and we discussed about how we are going to mic it, how what is going to be our format, where are the mics, are we going to have any spot mics or ambient mics. So we had the UA67s in the front, left, right. Then we had the M149s in the back. These were placed 3 feet above the tallest person in the room. Then there was a decatry in the front of the crowd towards the screen. So there was a decatry and there was a reflection behind the decatry to just capture the reflections. In the middle of the room, there was a sound field mic, and we were recording ambisonics in B format, which would later be used in post. And I think the sound field mic was in some situations a savior. So this was the setup. We were recording, we were straight going into Neve 88R, which is at YRF. So the front end or the capture was not a problem at all. The level or the dynamics was not a problem at all. And because we were recording with such good equipment, with such good crew, we got amazing output from them. One thing as a problem I faced in the post was, with so many people, sometimes the clarity of some slogans was being missed. And even after trying to clear them, I didn't get what I wanted. So that needs to be worked on, or maybe I'll work on. I'm telling this to you openly because I think people can get aware. When you bring in a lot of people in one room and when you ask them to say a slogan, many times the clarity of it gets lost. So you find it difficult to hear what it was. Just one slogan where we faced this, but yeah, I did face that problem, but otherwise it went on very smoothly.
And I'm guessing you had like multiple layers of these crowd chanting and the slogan chanting together.
What we did was, because we were recording with so many mics, any multiple layers would have caused phasing. So we avoided that. Every take was recorded on these group of mics. All these mics, the single capture was the layer that we took. We never doubled it or we never duplicated it. That was the layer. So whatever we wanted, we got it in that layer itself. The performances were stressed on. We stressed on the whole energy of the crowd. One very interesting thing that I need to tell you here is, whenever Balasaheb went on stage, there was this lead chant which used to happen, and then the crowd used to reply. And we got the guy who used to do it for him.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
like the same guy who used to do it.
The same guy who used to do it for him, because that was a different texture that we wanted. And I very early had told the director Abhijit Panse and producer Sanjay Raut if we could get the same person. And I was lucky enough to work with him, a very humble guy, and he was there throughout the day. And he is the guy who has been doing that for a long time. So all the leads that you hear are his leads.
I think it's small things like these that we as sound designers use, which I think brings an additional value to the overall soundtrack. You know, the audiences might not even realize that.
Absolutely.
But then I think what it brings to the final soundtrack, it's really, it has that authenticity to it.
Yeah.
Speaking of authenticity, the common problems which I face as a sound designer is the lack of authenticity in the quality and the performances of the crowds that we record inside the studio. Because I think the alternate approach to this is to record the crowd outside in an open environment, because that's where the crowd is in the film. Was there anything in particular that you did to enhance the performance of the crowd?
While recording at Yashraj, we said that, okay, if we are getting this, we could have got a better result if we had done outdoors. But then again, I wanted the crowd to perform in a certain way, which I think would have not been possible outdoors. So that's why we avoided, or we stopped ourselves from recording outdoors. But I think ultimately, if given a controlled outdoor environment, I would anytime choose to record there. A reference point for you and me would be Argo. the way they have done crowds for that. In fact, that was my reference point also. I somewhere wanted to achieve what they had achieved in Argo.
That was the film I was thinking of when I asked you that question.
Yeah. So so that was my reference point. And given a choice, yes, I would love to record crowds outside, but the environment needs to be controlled, because we have to also look at the way our crowd artists are. They're used to recording in small studios, in small spaces. In fact, a lot of crowd artists told me that they are doing this for the first time, which was very surprising for me. One advantage of recording crowds in a dynamic way is it brings in realism. I put a lot of stress even while doing crowds with small groups, wherein there are just 10 artists or 20 artists. I stress out a lot in recording them correctly, because that is what makes it very dynamic in nature.
True. So most of the film is set in the past. It marks Balasaheb's journey from 1966 to 1995. What were some of the challenges that you faced in regards to recording certain period sounds, like the ambiences, the cars, the printing press? Can you tell us a little bit about that process as well?
Again, a very good question. In fact, I read a lot about how Bombay sounded then, and I spoke to a lot of people, mostly because there was no references. Films in 60s didn't have such good sound design. So the first major character in that whole period thing was a tram. So we spoke to a lot of people as to how the Mumbai tram sounded like. One major character of the tram was the bell. The bell which used to ring at every stop. So we then found a few samples and we played it back to the people who had described the sound to us, and they pinpointed, oh, this is how it sounded. So that was the first point of authenticity, where we got 4 sounds of trams, and definitely from libraries, and we played it back to the people who had described them to us, and they said, this is what it sounded like. This is exactly what it sounded like. So we picked up that sound. Most of the cars were shown to me as pictures, and I did go out and find a accurate sample of those cars which was used. There's this rain sequence, which is the Krishna Desai murder, if you've seen the film. Yes. So the rain was created with a software called Audio Rain.
Okay.
So I used 2 layers of Audio Rain to to create that. I also use a software called Extreme FX from UVI. So usually it's MIDI mapped, and then I trigger those sounds. There is a fair bit of ESX24 also used in triggering some spot effects, the car doors, and some small things. So yeah, the authenticity was being minimalistic, because very early Kumar Doloy, who has done the re-recording, or who's the re-recording mixer on Thackeray, both of us had a meeting, and he did hear some ambiences and the sound edit, and he was the one who also echoed the whole decision of keeping it minimalistic in the black and white era. So there's not much playing in the background, in the surround speakers. There's not much on the top speakers. Only when there are scenes like the rain, we went on to the top speakers. But otherwise, it was just the 5-1 or the 7-1 bed which was playing most of the time. And again, being minimalistic, it was most of the time the exteriors were 2 layers of birds and a wind playing without much traffic, because Bombay was very quiet then. It was just a little bit of trams and a few cars flying here and there. So 1960s Bombay was very calm and quiet. So to fill up the interiors, we used radio programs. We used radio songs, which were of course royalty free and handpicked for the situation. So we did use that also, just to create that whole era of that. About the printing press, we the place where they had shot it, we went and recorded that machine with 2 416s. I didn't quite like the sound of it. So one of my friend's father has a workshop where he has a lot of hydraulic press brakes, and I got a chance to record those press brakes and then use that sound and layer it with the printing press sound to make it that way, to make it a little bit more I would say commercial.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one sound which kind of stood up, and I was like, oh, yeah, that sounds like
Yeah,
this thing. And one thing which was constantly going on in my mind was like, how did he do that? How did he
yeah,
manage to get those sounds? I mean,
yeah.
there's no way that there are clean recordings of those from the past. And I think that sounded great. And
Thank you.
the printing press really was a turning point in Balasaheb's life. And I think
Absolutely.
it's small things like these which kind of like, we shape our characters of the film through sound. And I think
Absolutely.
that was one such sound. So you mentioned that you use the sound field ambisonic microphone for recording the crowds. Can you tell us a little bit about that process? Like, how did you go about that? Was there any software which you had to use to enhance the audio or to decode it?
Yes, we do need a plugin to decode it, which is offered on the Soundfield website. So the Soundfield microphone records two stereo tracks, which ideally is a stereo mix, and then there are four quad tracks that it records, the WXYZ. And when you import those four tracks, it comes as a quad track into your DAW. In this case, we were using Pro Tools Ultimate. So when you get those tracks, then and you have to then download the plugin. Now this plugin is the brain of those four tracks. From that plugin, you can make them stereo, you can do a 5-1, you can do 7-1, you can control each parameter of those individual tracks. You can control how much of it is going into the LFE, how much you want to send into LFE. So the plugin is the heart of the mic. So recording on the mic is one aspect, and then processing it through the surround zone plugin is the second part of it. Bolo and myself, we put a lot of time, energy, and mind into how intelligently we could use that plugin on that chord track. So we ended up creating a bed sometimes. We ended up creating a different image than what was needed. We ended up creating perspectives with the plugin. So that's all about it. And once you record in Ambisonics, it hooks you up. I definitely want to use it to record ambiences for my next film or my next project, and then use it, because I think audio in VR is the present and the future, and we all should embrace it sooner or later. I mean,
This was, I think, the first Marathi film to be mixed in Atmos.
native
it?
Atmos, yes.
How did you use Atmos to your benefit in this scenario?
To start with, as a sound designer, I have limited knowledge about Atmos. I tend to work with re-recording engineers who are masters in their art and who are good at it. And I feel a sound editor or a sound designer should have an emotional connect to the re-recording engineer. Only then they both can work together and produce something really nice. With Thackeray, Boloy was our first choice for re-recording, and Boloy had done projects in Atmos. He had done Bahubali 2, he had done Dangal, so he had done all the big films, and I had a lot of meetings with him to discuss as to what could go into the whole immersive sound format. And from inputs from him, then I did my sound design. Like, there were places where he said, this, we'll just have a bed here, we won't go into objects, or we can use this as an object. So a lot of inputs were given by Boloy to me as to what could go in the whole Atmos format. What could be objects, where we could really make use of objects. And as you mentioned earlier, the tram, it was an object. So we wanted it to be dynamic in the movie theater. We wanted it to be playing dynamically in the format, so that became an object. So there were cars which were objects. So being a drama film, being a biopic, there was not much action. Wherever there was action, yes, we did have some hits and some slogans, which were, again, we used the top channels for it. We definitely had the crowd going into the 7-1 bed, into the whole Atmos thing. So I feel it's an amazing format, which is definitely for the storytellers, and can be, if understood correctly by the sound design team, it can really enhance the overall sound output of the film. It can make it sound better. Deliverables are good. The down mix sounds really nice. So we checked the down mix also, the down mix in 5.1. In fact, the international version which went out with the 5.1 mix, which 5.1 down mix. So that sounded really nice to me, and I think I'll be working more in that format.
So one of the other issues I say we face as sound designers is the fact that producers don't want to have their film mixed in Atmos, especially if it's a regional film, given the fact that there won't be enough theaters which might be allotted for that film. So was there any backlash for Thackeray as well in this regards?
Yes, in fact, in the beginning, it was decided that we would be mixing only the Hindi version in Dolby Atmos, and the Marathi would be just 5.1. But later on, I did bring my producers and directors to a mixing session where we played them back the Atmos mix, and then we played them back the 5.1 mix, and in that AB they picked up the Atmos mix, and that's where they decided that yes, we would go ahead with the Marathi Atmos also. I feel it is about producers being unaware or having inadequate knowledge about the format, the delivery, and the endless possibilities that it offers once you use it or once you mix your film in that format. I feel a lot of Marathi cinema is content driven. It definitely crosses the seven seas and goes to international festivals, and I feel we as sound designers need to make our producers aware that that is where the format is going to shine. That is where the whole audio, video, and the whole marriage of it is going to shine bright at international stages. So there's no downside to it. I don't see personally any downside to it being used widely as a format. I think the same thing happened when it transitioned from stereo SR to Dolby Digital. There was this whole confusion between shall we do it, does it sound good, what about the delivery. So I feel it is up to us to educate or make them aware about the possibilities, the positive side of it, and I feel I don't see any problem. In fact, after Thackeray, even Bhai is in Dolby Atmos, directed by Mahesh Manjrekar. Even that is in Dolby Atmos.
My misunderstanding about Atmos was that it is a format which I think would work well if your film is an action-packed film, where I could use objects going from above my head, and it could be used as a stylized medium. But I was wrong about that.
Let me use an analogy here that you're trying to read a newspaper with a 3-inch lens, and then you get in a 10-inch lens and you read the same newspaper. You eventually your words will look bigger. Now with Atmos you're using a bigger lens for the audio. So with the small lens you can still read the words. They are clear, they are big, but with a bigger lens they become bigger. So it just makes the whole the oral experience. And the best part now is Dolby Atmos is coming to homes. It is coming right down to the consumer level, with AV receivers, with amplifiers, with surround systems, and and Dolby is really pushing the format down to the consumer level, which in turn will benefit if you have mixed your film in Dolby Atmos. So regardless of the genre, it's just giving you a better, brighter picture. It's just giving you a larger image of the, and the best part is you can feel the sound finally. You can feel it. So that's the good thing.
So I saw both the versions of the film, both Hindi and Marathi. And one scene which stood out in both the versions was the bomb blast scene. And both the times it managed to get me on the edge of my seat. Would you like to deconstruct that scene for us?
Yeah, there was music earlier. Amar Mohile, who's done the background for it, he had kept it very dynamic. He has given me entire freedom on where I can use his music, where I cannot use his music. So there was music, and every time Abhijit Panse saw it, he said, "There's something amiss. I'm not getting scared enough. I'm not getting, oh, there's something going to happen." He wanted it to be preemptive. He wanted the audience to know that this is going to blow off. And even I had a creative argument with him that we should not tell the audience what is going to happen. But he said, no, I want the audience to know that this car is going to blow off. So there was a the ticker, the time bomb ticker, which was done, and the technique used was it goes on getting faster and it goes on increasing the pitch also. So we had to sit and do the entire tempo mapping of it, where it goes in a tempo of on a second and then it gets faster and then it goes into a blast. This was a real incident that had happened outside Sena Bhavan, and the way it was described to me was after the blast, the glasses of Sena Bhavan had shattered, and glasses even in the vicinity had shattered. It was such a big blast. So first thing was the ticker. So once the ticker was there and the blast was in place, we went through the scene without the music, and it did definitely work for us. And then I called up Amar and I said that, okay, this is what we are doing, and do you want to come and hear it? And when he heard it, and he also said that let's just take off music from here, and that's how the whole scene came into being. Like, it was the director's brief to prepare the audience for the blast, wherein I went in a little creative and I said, no, let's not do that. Let's have the music there and let's just bring in the blast at the end. So I do give credit to Abhijit sir for giving me that idea and taking me in that direction.
So, as sound designers, a lot of times we get into such creative arguments with the directors or the producers. And I'd like to take this opportunity and address the tiger in the room. You know what scene I'm talking about?
I know.
I'm talking about the scene where the Muslim lady and her family,
Yeah.
they come to meet Balasaheb Thackeray, and the camera is spanning from, I think, left to right. And you just hear a tiger roar
Yeah,
when
I know.
you see the statue. And that was an unexpected sound, and it felt
Yeah.
off. Me as a sound designer felt that it was a little off, but so did my other friends who are not sound designers.
Yeah, I know.
And I knew that this was not a sound designer's choice. It was a directorial choice.
Yeah.
And you get stuck, you get put in such situations where you do not have control over what the director wants.
Absolutely.
How do you suggest people should handle these situations without getting the situation more tense and making sure that you maintain an even balance?
You know how I look at the re-recording stage? I look at it as a huge buffet. So at the re-recording stage, everyone is in a huge restaurant with hundreds of dishes around them, and they don't know what to choose. So everyone's mind is like, oh, I want this, I want this, I want that, and I want to eat the entire buffet. So the re-recording stage is exactly like a buffet. So yeah, I haven't got so much backslash for a missing sound than this roar which was there in that room, which was not there earlier. And when we were playing it back to Abhijit sir, and he said, I need a roar. And I said, why? I mean, that whole thing started. And I feel it's a very thin line where sound designers need to understand their director's vision. I think he had a vision there. He had imagined the scene with a roar. And that's how it was playing in his head since the conception of that scene, since the day it was shot. So, in fact, the tiger as a prop was kept there with his vision of the roar being heard in the final mix. And my point was, we don't need it there, but he had envisioned the scene like that. He had wrote the scene with the roar in his mind. So I feel it is very important for sound designers, for re-recording engineers also, to sit with the director and know his vision, which we definitely did with Abhijit sir, where he gave us his vision about how he wants the riots to sound like, how he wants the sabhas to sound like, how he wants the different mic emulations to sound like. So I feel once the vision is clear, the process of re-recording and the process of enjoying that buffet becomes more fruitful for everyone. So yeah, that's it. It was the director's vision, where he wanted, and I would say that because he had imagined and wrote the scene like that, he was right on his point.
True, makes sense. I think that's a better way to maintain
Absolutely.
balance. Because in films, I think given the short deadlines and the amount of work, the amount of stress that
Yeah.
we have, it's very easy for anyone in any department to lose their cool. And creative field being such where everyone has their own opinions,
Absolutely.
I think it's better that we respect each other's opinions first and
Absolutely.
kind of establish a common ground, which
Yeah.
eventually works out well for the film. And eventually it's not your film, or like, you know, you're not the only one who's working on the film.
Absolutely.
And I think whatever is beneficial for the final film should be what should be in the film.
Exactly.
So talking about the bilingual aspect of the film was shot simultaneously in Hindi and Marathi. And that just got me wondering about how the entire post-production workflow went for that.
So here we dubbed the entire film 2 times, once in Hindi and once in Marathi. Even the crowd was done 2 times, once in Hindi and once in Marathi. So that was a very long process in itself. And once the dubbing was done, the Foley was done for the Hindi film. The sound design was done for the Hindi film. And once everything was bought into the re-recording stage, we had assumed that just editing job would, we would edit it and we would fit it onto the Marathi video. Unfortunately, to our nightmare, nothing was matching because they had shot the film in Marathi. So, for an example, the character of Balasaheb Thackeray, Nawazuddin Siddiqui, where he took 10 steps in Marathi, in Hindi, he had taken maybe 8 steps in Marathi. So, eventually, the footsteps of that part had to be redone. And for your information, we took almost 450 to 480 hours to mix both the languages, which was a marathon mixing session with us working 24/7 towards the end. So what we did was we mixed the Hindi version. We did the dialogue premixes for the Marathi. Amar got his music editor to edit the music bits and send us the new music files, which needed to be premixed again in Marathi. The Foley and the ambience was edited on the table there. And whatever Foley was required to be redone was redone by Karan Arjun Singh. So everyone was working round the clock. And to a point where we were so prone to errors, we were so prone to mistakes that anything would go amiss. So we had to, my sound editing assistant Pratik Goswami has done a beautiful job with the sound edit. So he was sitting and editing the reel-wise ambiences. I was doing the effects. So it was a very difficult process, but I think there was no other way to do it. There was no other way to do it or speed it up. If I wish I could have a bigger team and common DAW versions across all computers, but then we were working on Pro Tools Ultimate at the re-recording stage. At my studio, we had Pro Tools 10. At current studio, they have the Pro Tools 9. So this had its own challenges in a uniform DAW, and I feel it is very important for the industry to maintain a uniformity in their DAWs, which would make things faster. If all of us had Pro Tools Ultimate, it was just a session thing, but it was not that way. So there was clip automation, there was clip effects, there was clip EQ, which had to be maintained, which had to be similar. So yeah, it was very challenging. I mean, doing if it was just a dub, then it was just placing the dub on the mix. Here it was a parallel shoot. So yeah, I mean, now I have a workflow even for this kind of situation.
Did you go back and forth between the two versions, or did you
Yes.
have the first version, like the Hindi version, ready first,
Yeah.
and then you got to the Marathi version?
Yes, we first had the Hindi version completely mixed and ready for delivery. I think one thing which upcoming sound designers need to educate themselves is deliverables.
Mm-hmm.
Who needs them? When do they need them? What kind of format needs to be given? Young sound designers it can be really scary for them if they are not aware of all this. If a major studio is producing their film, then they have their own requirements. They have their own formats. They need it in a specific way. If it is going to a OTT platform, they have their own norms about delivery. So I feel even institutes should teach about delivery. The deliverables part is something a lot of young sound designers have no idea about what to do, how to maintain that, and that needs to be taken very seriously.
One of the problems which I face as a sound designer is a lack of perspective which you get after you've spent so much time with the film at the sound edit stage, that by the time you come to the mix, it becomes really difficult to separate what is actually sounding right or what is not. Because by the time you reach the re recording stage, you've already heard your film so many times that you kind of tend to lose perspective on certain things.
Yeah.
Well, in this case, you had two films to worry about
Yeah.
that way. Did you at any point just leave it completely on the re-recording mixer to go, like, let him do his work, and then you would come back after a few days, or like, just so that you have fresh set of ears?
I did that, in fact, because with Thackeray I was involved right from dubbing of the first character to the last character. So I was eventually seeing the film every day at the dub stage with different characters, with different actors, and both the languages. And it happened so that I was losing the perspective, as you said, very rightly said, because I was watching it over and over. I was just watching the same footage again and again. So what happened is, and yes, I was doing Foley also. So I was going to the Foley stage also, uh, sometimes to hear Foley. And at the point, it was definitely, I didn't know what was my vision for re-recording. So that's where Boloi came in. He had a look at the film. He used to come for the dubs also in between, just to see what was happening. But he was the person with the fresh mind, with a fresh set of ears. So what I did was, once the entire material was delivered to Boloi, I asked him to do his bit. And in those days, I went through the material as to the track lay, the sound design, the small things, and I used to just randomly look at them, just to know that okay, this is right, this is right, this is what has gone to the re-recording stage. And once Boloy had done his bit, like once he had finished the dialogue premix, that is where I went in with a fresh set of ears, with a fresh mind, just to know what was going on. And then it was like a long marathon.
I think Boloi did play a very
Yes, he
significant
did, yes.
role in this entire process. And one other thing which I wanted to know about was the whole negativity around the voice of Sachin Khedekar, which was first heard as the Marathi voice of Thackeray. And
Yeah.
I remember the entire YouTube comment section was just filled with negativity about, and
Yeah.
he has a recognizable voice. Like
Yes,
anyone who has
yes.
ever seen a Marathi film
Absolutely.
knows that it's Sachin's voice.
Yeah.
And a decision was made where you replaced Sachin with Mr. Chetan Shashithal, who in the past has also worked on a film where he had recorded Balasaheb Thakray's voice. What makes me curious is the process which took place afterwards, after his voice was recorded. How did the premix process go after that? Because he came in pretty late, right?
Yeah.
Just a few weeks before the film was about to release.
1 week
How
before.
1 week before the oh wow. How did that affect the premixing process? Because I think one of the main things is the kind of reverbs that you use.
Yeah.
Did you end up using the same sets of reverbs which you had used on Sachin's voice? How was that sound treated differently in mix?
To start with, I respect both the artists. Sachin sir is a very senior actor, has a amazing voice, and Chetan sir is known to be the man of 100 voices, and he's on a different planet for me. I wouldn't say which is good or which is bad here. But the process, I would tell you, what we did was we did the dialogue premix without anyone's voice. We knew that Chetan sir is getting dubbed. He's in the process of dubbing, and instead of getting reels, we asked the ADR engineer Kunal to give us the entire film with his voice, which arrived at the re-recording stage, say a week before the release, and then it was okay. Now this sounds different. We have done this for Nawazuddin. We need to do this for Chetan Sachital, because Nawazuddin is sounding like Nawazuddin in the Hindi version. Chetan Sachital spoke like Balasaheb Thackeray. So the dynamics had changed, the stresses had changed, everything had changed, and we had to do a lot of emulations again just to fit his voice in.
Wow, that's pretty remarkable. Well, that kind of wraps up my questions for Thackeray. So what's next? What are you working on?
I am doing a web series with Amazon Prime. It's called Bandish Bandits. It's a musical web series with Shankar Hassan Loy doing the music and Nasruddin Shah playing the lead. There is Atul Kulkarni also, and I'm doing the sound design for that. So that's in the shooting process right now. It's Sing Sound. So then there are a couple of Marathi films which I don't know the title myself. I'm just they've just contacted me, so that's it on the plate right now. But Thackeray was a 6-month journey, which I am still in. I still have the hangover of it. So I think, yeah, I'll be out of it soon.
Do you want to give any tips for anyone who's starting out?
Try and be a part of the entire process. So do the dubbing, go for Foley sessions, talk to your seniors, and most importantly, try and have an idol. If possible, multiple idols, because those are the people whose work you will keep on referencing, or you will take inspiration from. I don't mind telling my idols. I have Nakul Kamte as my idol. I adore what Bishwadeep Chatterjee does. So these are all our heroes in our country. So, and their work is accessible to us. There is, of course, Razul Pukuti also. I like mixing done by Justin Joes. I've started liking what Bola has done. Debajit Changmai, of course, one of the most dynamic re-recording engineers we have. We have Ajay. We have Anuj sir, who's also a great re-recording engineer. So I keep following their work and keep taking inspiration from them. So don't stop doing that, because every generation will have teachers in the senior generation. So keep following their work, so that you know what the best in the business are doing, and then you know where you have to reach. So that's the only advice.
So I think that should be a good point to conclude our podcast today. So just before we go, where can people get in touch with you?
I am on Twitter, Rohit Mix. I am on Instagram, Mix with Rohit. And I'm very less on Facebook actually. But these are the two platforms where they can connect with me.
All right, so there you have it. Anyone who wants to get in touch with Rohit, please DM him. And thank you so much, Rohit, once again for being a part of this podcast.
Yeah, thank you.
And to all of y'all who plugged in, thank you so much for listening. This is the first time I'm doing something like this. So if you like the podcast, let me know. And if you didn't like it, then definitely let me know. This is Aditya Yadav signing off. Until next time. Bye.